When my daughter told me to stop being dramatic and learn to survive, the day after burying my husband of 40 years, I crumbled inside like a sandcastle hit by a wave. 3 weeks later, I was sleeping in my car outside the same grocery store where I once bought her favorite birthday cakes. That's when I realized life isn't just a journey. It's a battlefield where the people who should guard your back sometimes stick the knife in deepest. If you're watching this, please subscribe and share in the comments if someone you trusted ever turned their back when you needed them most. Trust me when I say, revenge tastes sweeter when it's served after you've eaten dirt. The funeral had been picture perfect, if funerals can ever be called that. My Harold looked peaceful in his casket, almost like he was sleeping. The roses, white ones his favorite, covered nearly every surface of the church. Our friends, neighbors, even his old colleagues from the accounting firm all showed up. Some I hadn't seen in 15 years. They hugged me, patted my shoulder, and whispered those useless words people say when they don't know what else to offer. He's in a better place now. Time heals all wounds. Call if you need anything. I nodded like a wind-up doll, too numb to do anything else.
Cancer is cruel that way.
It gives you time to prepare, but no amount of preparation actually helps. For 18 months, I watched the strongest man I knew wither away, reduced to bones and shallow breaths. I cleaned him, fed him, and whispered our memories into his ear long after the doctors said he couldn't hear me anymore. And through it all, our daughter Melissa barely visited. Always too busy with her real estate career, her yoga retreats, her social media brand building. But she came to the funeral dressed in tasteful black, her makeup perfect, her expression appropriately somber for the photos she later posted online with captions about celebrating a life well lived. She stood beside me at the cemetery, her hand on my arm, looking every bit the grieving daughter. I thought, foolishly, that my child had finally shown up for me, that in my darkest hour, blood would mean something. The morning after we buried Harold, I sat at our kitchen table, our table for 40 years, staring at bills I couldn't comprehend. Harold had always handled our finances. Not because I couldn't, but because it gave him peace to care for me that way. Now, paper mountains of insurance forms, medical bills, and bank statements surrounded me like an avalanche waiting to happen. "Mom," Melissa said, standing in the doorway in her silk pajamas, coffee cup in hand. "What are you doing?" I looked up, my eyes raw from crying all night. "Trying to figure out our finances. Dad, he always handled these things." She sighed, that special side children perfect when they think their parents are being difficult. She set her coffee down and picked up one of the insurance documents, scanning it quickly. "You know, this house is way too big for just you," she said, not looking at me. "And from what Dad said last time we talked, your savings took a hit with all the medical expenses." "We'll manage," I said, though I had no idea if that was true. "Your father was always careful with money." Melissa put the paper down and finally met my eyes. "Mom, I've been thinking. It might be better if you sold this place. You could get a nice little condo, something manageable. No yard work, no big utility bills." The idea hit me like a slap. Leave my home? The house where Harold and I had raised our family, hosted Thanksgiving dinners, and planted the dogwood tree that now stood 20 feet tall in the backyard? The home where his presence still lingered in the worn spot on his recliner, in the coffee mug with his name that I couldn't bear to put away? "I can't leave," I whispered. "This is our home." "Mom." Her voice sharpened. "Dad's gone. This isn't our home anymore. It's just a house that's too expensive and too big for a woman your age to maintain alone." "A woman my age?" I repeated, the words stinging. "You know what I mean," she continued, waving her hand dismissively. "You're 68. You should be downsizing, simplifying. I could help you list the house. The market in this neighborhood is hot right now." That's when I noticed something in her eyes. Not concern, not compassion. Something calculating. And suddenly I understood. "You want me to sell so you can get your inheritance now," I said quietly. Instead of waiting. Her face flushed, just for a moment, before she composed herself. "That's absurd. I'm thinking about what's best for you. Harold and I always planned to age in place," I said, my voice stronger now. This house is paid off. Even with the medical bills, we have savings. I just need time to sort through everything. Melissa's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then stood up. Look, I've got a showing in an hour. We can talk about this later. But seriously, Mom, you need to be practical. Dad was the practical one, and now you have to step up. I stared at her, this stranger in my daughter's body. I just buried my husband yesterday. And I just lost my father, she snapped. But I'm not falling apart. Life goes on, Mom. The bills don't stop coming just because we're sad. I felt tears welling up again. I need a little time, Melissa. Just a little time to breathe. She sighed again and walked over to me, placing a hand on my shoulder that felt heavy instead of comforting. Don't be dramatic. Pack your bags and learn to survive. That's what Dad would want, for you to be strong, not sitting here drowning in tissues and paperwork. The words pierced me deeper than she could know. Don't be dramatic? My soulmate of 45 years was gone, and I wasn't allowed to grieve? I wasn't being strong enough? I looked at this woman, my child, my only child, and for the first time in my life, I felt nothing but a cold emptiness where maternal love should be. I think you should go to your showing, I said flatly. Mom.
Please.
Just go. After she left, I sat there until the afternoon light shifted across the table. Then I got up and went to our bedroom, my bedroom now, and opened Harold's closet. His clothes still hung there, pressed and organized as always. I reached for his favorite cardigan, the soft blue one I'd given him for his birthday 3 years ago, and held it to my face. It still smelled like him. I sank to the floor, clutching that cardigan, and let myself break open completely. For the next week, Melissa intensified her campaign. She brought over real estate magazines, left them open to downsizing articles. She invited a friend who happened to be an estate sales specialist to coffee. She talked endlessly about a charming retirement community where I could make new friends my own age. When I continued to resist, her tactics changed. She started commenting on dust gathering on the bookshelves, the gutters that needed cleaning, the yard work that was piling up. Dad always kept this place so nice, she'd say with manufactured concern. It breaks my heart to see it getting run down. It had been 2 weeks since the funeral. Then came the financial pressure. Mom, do you even know what your monthly expenses are? Have you figured out what your income will be without Dad's pension? What about property taxes? They're outrageous in this neighborhood. The truth was, I hadn't figured it all out yet. Harold had left files, of course, meticulously organized as everything in his life had been. But every time I tried to open them, grief would overwhelm me. It felt like another goodbye, another piece of him slipping away. I have an appointment with Mr. Grayson next month, I told her, referring to Harold's longtime attorney. He's going to help me sort through everything. Next month. Melissa scoffed. Mom, that's ridiculous. You need to handle this now. I can help you this weekend. We'll go through all the paperwork together. Something in her eagerness made me uneasy. No, I'd rather wait for Mr. Grayson. Harold trusted him. Dad's not here anymore, she said, the words cutting like glass. And frankly, I don't trust Grayson. Dad was too loyal to these old-school professionals who charge a fortune. I know a great financial advisor who specializes in widows' estates. Widows' estates. The term made me sound like a plot of land, a thing to be managed and divided. No, thank you, I said firmly. I'll wait for Mr. Grayson. That night, after Melissa went back to her downtown loft, I finally found the courage to open Harold's study. Everything was exactly as he'd left it. The leather blotter on his desk, the fountain pen he loved, the family photos arranged precisely on the bookshelf. I sat in his chair, running my hands over the worn armrests where his hands had rested for countless hours. The bottom right drawer was locked, as it had always been. Harold had kept his most important documents there. I knew where he hid the key, in a small box designed to look like a book on the shelf, tucked between his beloved Hemingway collection. Inside, I found not only the key, but an envelope with my name written in his steady handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it. My dearest Elizabeth, if you're reading this, I've left you alone, a thought that breaks my heart even as I write these words. For 45 years, I've had the privilege of walking through life with you, and my only regret is that I couldn't give you 45 more. I know you're hurting. I know the world seems empty and cold without me there. But Lizzie, my brave girl, you are stronger than you've ever given yourself credit for. I've watched you raise our daughter, manage our home, support me through every challenge, all while making it look effortless. That strength didn't come from me. It was always in you. There are things you need to know. Business matters I've arranged. Go to Calvin Grayson. Only Calvin. He has my instructions and will explain everything when the time is right. Don't let anyone, not even Melissa, pressure you into decisions before you speak with him. I've watched our daughter become someone I sometimes don't recognize. The ambition I once admired in her has hardened into something else. I've tried to guide her back to the values we taught her, but perhaps I failed in that. So I've taken steps to protect you, my love. Trust Calvin. Trust yourself. And know that even death cannot diminish the love I have for you. All my heart, Harold. I clutched the letter to my chest, tears streaming down my face. Even from beyond, he was trying to take care of me, protect me. From our own daughter? The thought was almost too painful to bear. But as I sat there in the gathering darkness, surrounded by the remnants of my husband's life, something inside me shifted. A tiny ember of resolve began to glow where there had been only ashes of grief. I would honor Harold's wishes. I would wait for Mr. Grayson. And I would not be pushed from my home. The next morning, I woke to the sound of voices downstairs. Melissa's, and a man's I didn't recognize. I quickly dressed and made my way down to find my daughter and a stranger in suits standing in my living room, studying the crown molding. The original details add so much value, the man was saying. You don't find craftsmanship like this in modern construction. Melissa? I said from the doorway. What's going on? She turned, momentarily startled, then composed her face into a smile that didn't reach her eyes.
Mom.
You're up early. This is Derek Chambers, my colleague from the agency. I was just showing him some of the architectural features you and Dad preserved so beautifully. The man stepped forward, hand extended. Mrs. Porter, it's a pleasure. Your home is absolutely stunning. A true craftsman treasure. I ignored his hand. You're a real estate agent? One of the best in the city, Melissa jumped in. Derek specializes in historic homes like ours, like yours. I didn't invite either of you here this morning, I said, my voice shakier than I wanted it to be. And I certainly didn't authorize anyone to evaluate my home for sale. Derek's smile faltered. He glanced at Melissa, who let out an exasperated sigh. Mom, it's just a casual look. No pressure. I thought if you heard from an expert how much you could get for this place, it might help you see the opportunities. The opportunity to be homeless? I asked, surprising myself with the edge in my voice. Don't be ridiculous, Melissa snapped. You'd buy something smaller, more manageable. Maybe even have money left over to enjoy your retirement. Travel a little. Isn't that what you and Dad always talked about? What Harold and I had talked about was growing old in this house, sitting on our back porch watching the seasons change, hosting our grandchildren for summers. Grandchildren Melissa had always been too career-focused to consider. Please leave, I said to Derek.
Now.
He had the decency to look embarrassed. Of course, Mrs. Porter. I apologize for the intrusion. He handed me a business card that I immediately dropped on the coffee table. If you ever do decide. She will, Melissa interrupted. She just needs time to accept reality. I'll walk you out, Derek. When she returned, her face was flushed with anger. What is wrong with you? Do you have any idea how hard it was to get Derek to come by? He's booked months in advance. I didn't ask you to bring a real estate agent into my home, I said, feeling something unfamiliar rising in me. Not grief this time. Anger. I didn't ask for any of this, Melissa. Because you're not thinking clearly. She threw her hands up in frustration. You're living in the past, clinging to this mausoleum of memories instead of planning for your future. A mausoleum? I repeated, stunned by her cruelty. This is your childhood home. The place your father poured his heart into. How dare you reduce it to that? It's a house, Mom. An old, oversized house that's going to become a money pit. Dad would be practical about this. Don't tell me what your father would do, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous quiet. You barely knew him these last few years. Too busy for Sunday dinners, too important for family holidays. You swept in for a few hours at Christmas and his birthday, then disappeared back to your important life. Her face hardened. That's not fair. I have a career. I'm building something. And what exactly are you building, Melissa? A life without room for family? For the people who love you? Your father was dying, and you couldn't find time to sit with him, to help with his care, to give me even a few hours respite. I sent money, she shouted. I paid for the night nurse when insurance wouldn't cover it. Money, I echoed hollowly. Yes, you're good with money, aren't you? Always have been. From the moment you could count, you were calculating. We stood there, mother and daughter, staring at each other across a chasm that seemed unbridgeable. In her eyes, I saw something I never wanted to admit was there. Coldness. Calculation. A stranger wearing my child's face. This conversation is pointless, she finally said, reaching for her designer handbag. You're emotional and irrational right now. We'll talk when you've calmed down. No, I said simply. I don't think we will. I'd like you to leave, Melissa. She blinked, genuinely surprised. Leave? This is ridiculous. Where am I supposed to go?
Home.
To your loft. To your life that's too busy for an old woman in a mausoleum. Mom, please go. My voice was steady now, surprising even me. I need space to grieve my husband without being treated like a problem to solve. For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of something, regret, perhaps, in her eyes. But it vanished as quickly as it had appeared. Fine, she said coolly. Call me when you're ready to be reasonable. After she left, I sank onto the sofa, exhausted in a way sleep couldn't fix. The house felt both too empty and too full, empty of Harold's presence, but overflowing with 4 decades of memories. I looked around at the living room where we'd opened Christmas presents, hosted dinner parties, cuddled on the couch watching old movies. How could I leave this place? It wasn't just a house. It was the physical manifestation of our love story. For the next few days, Melissa kept her distance, which should have been a relief. Instead, it filled me with a nagging unease. My daughter wasn't one to surrender a battle easily. She'd inherited her father's tenacity, if not his compassion. On Thursday afternoon, I heard a key in the front door. Harold and I had given Melissa a key years ago for emergencies. I hadn't thought to ask for it back. Mom, she called, her voice suspiciously cheerful. Are you home? I was in the kitchen, attempting to cook for the first time since Harold died. Just soup from a can, but it felt like climbing Everest. In here, I answered cautiously. She appeared in the doorway, looking polished in a cream blazer and tailored pants, a bright smile plastered on her face. Behind her stood an older woman I'd never seen before. Mom, this is Diane Simmons, Melissa said, ushering the woman forward. She's a senior living consultant. I thought it might be helpful for you to talk with someone who specializes in helping people your age transition to the next phase of life. The woman stepped forward with a practiced smile. Mrs. Porter, it's lovely to meet you. I've helped hundreds of widows like yourself find their perfect next chapter. I set down the soup can I was holding. Melissa, we discussed this. I'm not selling my home. No one's talking about selling anything today, my daughter said smoothly. Diane just wants to have a conversation about options. She has a wonderful portfolio of communities to show you. Communities? I repeated. Active adult living environments, Diane clarified, pulling a glossy brochure from her bag. Places where people in your situation can find companionship, security, and appropriate care as their needs evolve. My situation? I felt my grip on civility slipping. And what situation is that, exactly? Mom, Melissa interjected. Diane is just trying to help. After our conversation the other day, I realized I wasn't being sensitive enough to your emotional needs. These communities offer grief counseling, social activities, people your own age to connect with. So I'm not just old, I'm also pitiful and lonely? I asked, my voice rising despite my effort to stay calm. Diane stepped back slightly, her professional smile faltering. Perhaps this isn't the best time? It isn't, I agreed. In fact, there will never be a good time for this conversation because I am not moving to a retirement home. I'm 68, not 98. I don't need appropriate care or a community of old people to play bingo with. Mrs. Porter. Diane tried again. Many of our residents felt the same way initially. Change is scary at any age. But once they experience the freedom from home maintenance, the social calendar, the security of knowing help is always nearby. Get out, I said quietly. Excuse me? Diane blinked. Both of you, get out of my house. I was shaking now, but not from fear or grief. From rage. Pure, cleansing rage that burned through the fog I'd been living in. Mom, you're being completely unreasonable, Melissa snapped, her pleasant facade cracking. We're trying to help you. No, you're trying to help yourself, I said, the truth of it suddenly crystal clear. You want me tucked away somewhere so you can sell this house and take whatever money your father left. Well, it's not going to happen. Not today, not ever. Diane was already backing toward the door, murmuring something about another time and family discussions. But Melissa stood her ground, her face hardening into something ugly and unfamiliar. You think you can manage this place on your own? Pay the property taxes, fix the roof when it leaks, shovel snow from the driveway? Dad did all of that. You don't even know how to reset the circuit breaker when it trips. I can learn, I said simply. She laughed, a harsh sound nothing like the girlish giggle I remembered from her childhood. Learn? Mom, you can barely work your cell phone. You've spent your whole life depending on Dad for everything. Now he's gone, and you're going to have to face reality. Each word was a dagger, precisely aimed at my deepest insecurities. And they hit their mark. I had depended on Harold. He had been the practical one, the fix-it person, the financial manager. I'd been the heart of our home, the cook, the decorator, the social coordinator, the emotional caretaker. We'd been a team, each with our strengths. But now, in my daughter's cold assessment, my contributions counted for nothing. I may not know how to fix a circuit breaker, I said slowly, finding my voice again, but I know how to recognize someone who sees me as nothing but a burden and an obstacle. Your father saw it too. Something flickered in her eyes, surprise, perhaps, or worry. What are you talking about? Harold left me a letter, I said. He warned me about you. It wasn't entirely true. Harold's letter had been gentler, more nuanced. But I wanted to hurt her, to make her feel even a fraction of the pain her words had caused me. That's ridiculous, she scoffed, but I could see uncertainty in her face. Dad would never. He saw what you've become, I continued, the words pouring out now. Money-hungry, calculating, willing to throw your own mother away like garbage the moment she becomes inconvenient. I'm trying to help you, she shouted, her composure finally cracking completely. You're the one being stubborn and stupid. This house is worth over $1 million, Mom. Do you have any idea what you could do with that kind of money? What I could do with it? But no, you want to cling to this monument to the past while life passes you by. There it was. The truth, finally laid bare between us. What you could do with it, I repeated softly. There it is. This isn't about me at all, is it? It's about what you want. She ran a hand through her perfectly highlighted hair, visibly trying to regain control. Of course I think about the future. Someone in this family has to. I have plans, investment opportunities, ways to grow the family wealth instead of watching it stagnate in outdated real estate. Get out, I said for the third time. And don't come back until you're ready to be a daughter instead of a vulture. For a moment, I thought she might argue further. Instead, she grabbed her purse, her movements sharp with anger.
Fine.
Sit here and rot if that's what you want. But don't call me when the water heater breaks or the property taxes come due. You wanted independence? Congratulations. You've got it. The door slammed behind her with such force that the family photos on the wall rattled. One fell, the frame cracking as it hit the hardwood floor. I picked it up with trembling hands. It was a picture from Melissa's college graduation, her between Harold and me, all of us smiling. I traced my finger over our faces, wondering where that family had gone. That night, I couldn't sleep. Melissa's words kept echoing in my head, mixing with Harold's letter, creating a storm of doubt and fear. What if she was right? What if I couldn't manage on my own? The house was paid off, yes, but there were still taxes, utilities, maintenance. Harold's pension would stop, though I'd get a reduced survivor's benefit. We had savings, but how much? And for how long? The questions multiplied until dawn found me still awake, my pillow damp with tears. I forced myself out of bed and into the shower. The routine helped. Shampoo, rinse, soap, rinse. Simple steps that required no decisions, no courage. Afterward, I dressed carefully in slacks and a sweater Harold had always liked, applied a touch of makeup, and did my hair. Armor against the day. Downstairs, I made coffee and toast, then sat at the kitchen table where we'd shared thousands of meals. The silence pressed in from all sides. No Harold humming as he read the morning paper. No radio playing the oldies station he loved. Just me, alone with cooling coffee and the rest of my life stretching ahead like an empty highway. My cell phone rang, startling me. Melissa's name flashed on the screen. Despite everything, hope flickered. Maybe she was calling to apologize, to make amends. Hello, Mom. Her voice was cool, businesslike. I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday. I said some things I shouldn't have. Relief washed over me. I did too, sweetheart. Maybe we could. Let me finish, she interrupted. I shouldn't have pushed so hard. You're grieving, and I need to respect that. So I've come up with a compromise. I waited, suddenly wary. I've spoken with my financial advisor. He thinks we should put the house in my name now for tax purposes. You would have lifetime rights to live there, of course. But this way, when you're eventually ready to downsize, or if something happens to you, there won't be any estate complications. The relief curdled into something sour. You want me to sign over my home to you? The home your father and I paid for? It's a smart financial move, Mom. Dad would understand the tax advantages. And nothing would change for you day to day. Except I would no longer own my own home. Except I would be dependent on my daughter's goodwill. The same daughter who had been trying to force me into a retirement community just yesterday. No, I said firmly. Absolutely not. Mom, please just talk to my advisor. He can explain the benefits better than I can. I don't need to talk to your advisor. I need to talk to Mr. Grayson, which is exactly what I'm going to do. There was a pause then. Grayson? Dad's old school attorney? Mom, that man is practically a dinosaur. His ideas about estate planning are from the last century. Nevertheless, he's the one your father trusted. And right now, he's the one I trust too. This is ridiculous, she muttered, not quite under her breath. I'm trying to help you, to protect your assets, our family assets. Thank you for your concern, I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. But I'll handle my affairs my way.
Fine.
The word was clipped, angry. But don't say I didn't try to help when the tax bill comes due. She hung up without saying goodbye. I sat there for a long time, the phone in my hand, trying to reconcile the daughter on the other end of that call with the little girl who used to climb into my lap for comfort, who made me handmade Mother's Day cards, who cried when she went away to college because she would miss her dad and me so much. When had she changed? Or had she always been this way, and I'd been too blinded by maternal love to see it? Finally, I picked up the phone again and dialed Mr. Grayson's office. His secretary answered, her voice warm with recognition when I gave my name. Mrs. Porter, we've been thinking of you. How are you holding up? I've been better, Jean, I admitted. Is Mr. Grayson available? I need to speak with him rather urgently. Let me check. There was a brief pause then. He can see you at 2 this afternoon. Will that work? Yes, thank you. I'll be there. I spent the morning gathering documents, our deed, insurance policies, bank statements, anything I could find that might be relevant. Harold had always kept meticulous records, but navigating his filing system without him felt like trying to read a map in a foreign language. At 1:30, I got into my car, a modest Toyota that was already 5 years old, but which Harold had maintained perfectly, and drove to the downtown office building where Calvin Grayson had practiced law for over 40 years. The familiar routine of driving, parking, taking the elevator to the 12th floor gave me a small sense of normalcy, a brief respite from the chaos my life had become. Mr. Grayson's office hadn't changed in the decades I'd been coming here with Harold. The same wood-paneled walls, leather chairs, and law books lining the shelves. Even the receptionist's desk looked frozen in time, though Jean herself had aged gracefully alongside us. "Elizabeth," Mr. Grayson said warmly, coming out to greet me himself. He was in his 70s now, his hair completely white, but his handshake was still firm, his blue eyes sharp behind tortoiseshell glasses. "Come in, please." I followed him into his office, clutching my folder of documents like a lifeline. "First, let me say again how sorry I am about Harold," he said as we sat down. "He was not just a client but a friend. I miss him greatly." "Thank you," I said, the familiar words of condolence, somehow less hollow coming from him. "I appreciate that." "Now," he continued, folding his hands on his desk, "Jean said you needed to speak with me urgently. What can I help you with?" I took a deep breath. "It's about Harold's will, our house, our finances, everything really. But mostly," my voice caught, "it's about Melissa." His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes.
I see.
"Tell me what's happening."
So I did.
I told him everything. Melissa's pressure to sell the house, her attempt to get me to sign it over to her, her dismissive cruelty. As I spoke, he listened intently, occasionally making notes, but never interrupting. "And then I found a letter," I finished. "From Harold. He said you had instructions, that I should trust only you." Mr. Grayson nodded slowly.
Yes.
Harold came to see me several times in his final months. He was concerned about certain matters. "About Melissa," I said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," he confirmed. "About Melissa and about protecting you." He opened a drawer and removed a thick file. "Harold amended his will 6 months ago. He asked that I not discuss the changes with you until after his passing, and then only when you came to me directly." My heart pounded. "What changes?" "Before I get to that," Mr. Grayson said carefully, "I need to ask you something. Has Melissa suggested any financial arrangements? Loans, transfers, anything involving your assets?" "She wants me to put the house in her name," I said, "for tax purposes. She says I would have lifetime rights to live there." He made a sound, not quite a snort, but close. "I'm sure she does. And what did you tell her?" "That I needed to speak with you first." "Good." He nodded approvingly. "Very good. Now, what I'm about to tell you may be difficult to hear, but Harold wanted you to know everything." For the next hour, Mr. Grayson laid out a story that made my blood run cold. Harold, it seemed, had discovered something troubling in the months before his death. Melissa had approached him about investing a significant portion of our savings in a real estate development she was involved with. Harold, always cautious, had asked for details, business plans, projections. What he received instead were vague promises of exceptional returns and pressure to act quickly before the opportunity disappeared. When he continued to resist, Melissa had grown increasingly frustrated. "Harold began to worry," Mr. Grayson said gently. "Not just about the investment itself, which he found suspicious, but about Melissa's insistence." He decided to do some digging. What Harold found shocked him to his core. The development barely existed, just a shell company with glossy brochures and no actual property. Worse, he discovered that Melissa had accumulated significant debt, credit cards, a second mortgage on her loft, personal loans. She was, in essence, financially drowning. He believed she wanted your savings to bail herself out, Mr. Grayson concluded. Not to invest, but to solve her own financial problems. I felt like I couldn't breathe. "Why didn't he tell me?" "He wanted to protect you from the pain of it," he said simply. And he hoped, until the very end, that he was wrong, that there was some explanation that would make sense of it all. And the will? I asked, my voice barely audible. What did he change? Mr. Grayson opened the file. Essentially, he created a trust. All of your assets, the house, savings, investments, insurance payouts, everything goes into this trust with you as the sole beneficiary during your lifetime. You have complete control over these assets. You can sell the house if you choose, invest differently, whatever you decide. And after I'm gone? That's where it gets interesting, he said. Harold included a conditional inheritance clause for Melissa. If and only if she treats you with the respect and care a daughter should show her mother, particularly during your time of grief, she will eventually inherit a portion of the estate. If not, he paused, adjusting his glasses before continuing. If not, the entire estate will go to a foundation Harold established in your names, dedicated to supporting elderly individuals who have been abandoned or mistreated by their families. I sat back, stunned. Harold had seen it all, had known what might happen, had prepared for it. Even as cancer ravaged his body, he'd been thinking ahead, putting protections in place for me. There's more, Mr. Grayson continued. Harold kept meticulous records of Melissa's behavior over the past few years. Missed holidays, abbreviated visits, her absence during critical medical treatments. He also documented her financial requests and the research he did into her investment opportunity. All of this is included in a letter to be read only if Melissa contests the will. She'll be furious, I whispered, a chill running through me. Yes, he agreed soberly. I expect she will be. Which is why Harold included one more provision. He leaned forward. Elizabeth, does Melissa know about any of this? About the amended will or the trust? I shook my head.
No.
Harold never mentioned it, and I haven't discussed financial details with her beyond refusing to sell the house or sign it over.
Good.
Because the final provision is this. Melissa is not to be informed of the conditional nature of her inheritance. As far as she knows, the estate simply goes into a trust for your benefit during your lifetime, with her as the eventual heir. The condition, her treatment of you, is to remain confidential between you, me, and the trustee. Why the secrecy? I asked, though I was beginning to understand. Harold wanted her behavior toward you to be genuine, not motivated by financial gain. He said, Mr. Grayson looked down at his notes, that if she could only be kind to her mother for money, then she wasn't the daughter they raised, and didn't deserve the inheritance anyway. Tears filled my eyes. Even now, even after death, Harold was trying to give our daughter a chance to be her better self. When will she be told about the will? I asked. I've scheduled a reading for next week. Tuesday at 10 a.m. I've already notified Melissa. She'll learn about the trust then, but not about the conditional clause. That remains between us. I nodded, trying to absorb everything. And in the meantime? In the meantime, he said gently, you go home, you grieve your husband, and you pay attention to your daughter's behavior. Document everything, calls, visits, the pressure to sell. Keep a journal if you can. It may become important later. As I stood to leave, feeling both relieved and burdened by this new knowledge, Mr. Grayson placed a fatherly hand on my shoulder. Elizabeth, Harold was one of the finest men I've ever known. He loved you completely. Whatever happens with Melissa, remember that. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. And one more thing, he added. Harold set up a separate account for you, emergency funds, he called it. The details are in this envelope. He was adamant that you have resources that were absolutely yours alone, no matter what. I took the sealed envelope with trembling hands. Thank you, Calvin, for everything. I'll see you Tuesday, he said. Try to rest until then. The storm is coming, but you don't have to face it alone. The drive home was a blur. My mind raced with everything I'd learned, Melissa's financial troubles, Harold's foresight, the conditional inheritance. By the time I pulled into our driveway, dusk was falling, casting long shadows across the lawn. The house was dark. I hadn't left any lights on, not expecting to be gone so long. As I fumbled with my keys at the front door, a movement caught my eye, a figure rising from one of the porch chairs. Mom. I nearly dropped my keys. Melissa? What are you doing sitting out here in the dark? She stepped into the pool of light cast by the porch lamp. Her face was composed, but I could see tension in the set of her shoulders. I've been calling you for hours. Where were you? The accusatory tone made something harden inside me. I had an appointment. An appointment? With who? I pushed past her and unlocked the door. I don't believe I'm required to report my whereabouts to you, Melissa. She followed me inside, switching on lights as we moved through the foyer into the living room. I was worried. You're not exactly used to handling things on your own. I've been driving myself to appointments for decades, I said, setting down my purse and the folder Mr. Grayson had given me. Your concern, while touching, is unnecessary. Something in my tone made her pause. She studied me with narrowed eyes. You're different today. Am I?
Yes.
Less fragile. She said it like she wasn't sure it was a good thing. Look, Mom, about our conversation this morning, I've been thinking. Maybe I pushed too hard about the house. Maybe, I echoed, unable to keep the edge from my voice. She had the grace to look slightly abashed. Definitely. I pushed too hard. I just want what's best for you, and sometimes I get carried away. What's best for me? I repeated slowly, or what's best for you? Her expression flickered, surprise, then a flash of anger quickly concealed. For both of us, ideally. We're family. What benefits one benefits all, right? Family. The word felt hollow coming from her lips after everything I'd learned today. I thought of the debts Mr. Grayson had mentioned, the financial hole she dug herself into, her desperate attempt to access our savings. Right, I said flatly. Family. She moved closer, her voice softening. Mom, I know I've been insensitive. Grief makes us all act in ways we normally wouldn't. You lost your husband, and I've been so focused on practical matters that I haven't given you space to mourn. The performance was good, almost convincing. If I hadn't just come from Mr. Grayson's office, I might have believed her. What do you want, Melissa? I asked directly, because this sudden concern feels convenient. She blinked, momentarily thrown off script. I told you I'm worried about you. And she hesitated. I need to ask you something important. There it was.
What?
She sat on the edge of the sofa, leaning forward with an earnest expression I'd seen her practice in the mirror as a teenager before asking to borrow the car. I have an amazing investment opportunity, a property development that's absolutely guaranteed to double our money within 18 months. But the buy-in window closes Friday, and I'm a little short on capital. How short? I asked, though I already knew the answer would be substantial. Just $150,000, she said, as if it were pocket change. I've already put in $50,000 of my own money, but to secure the position, I need a bit more. The lie was so smooth, so practiced, it almost sounded like truth. But Mr. Grayson had shown me the documents Harold had gathered. There was no investment, just mounting debt and desperation. And you want me to give you $150,000, I said. Just like that. Not give, invest, she corrected quickly. You be a partner. We'd both benefit. And it's not like you need the cash right now. It's just sitting in accounts earning minimal interest. I studied my daughter's face, the face I'd once kissed goodnight every evening, the face that had looked up at me with unquestioning love. When had that love calcified into this cold calculation? The money your father and I saved was meant for our retirement, I said carefully. For medical expenses, for security in our old age. And it still can be, she insisted. That's the beauty of this investment. It grows your security instead of letting it stagnate. I thought of Harold's letter, of Mr. Grayson's warnings, of the emergency account Harold had set up without even telling me. My husband had known, had seen the danger coming. I need time to think about it, I said finally. Relief flooded her face. She thought I was considering it. Of course, Mom. Take all the time you need until Friday. And in the meantime, I added, Mr. Grayson has scheduled a meeting to go over your father's will. Tuesday at 10. Her expression changed instantly. Grayson? I told you, Mom. That man is out of touch. We should be working with my financial advisor on this, not some dinosaur dad insisted on keeping out of loyalty. Nevertheless, I said firmly, that's when the will reading is scheduled. I expect you to be there. She stood up, smoothing her skirt with hands that weren't quite steady.
Fine.
I'll move some things around, but afterward, I really think we should. We'll discuss everything after the meeting, I interrupted. Now, if you don't mind, I'm very tired. It's been a long day. For a moment, she looked like she might argue. Then she nodded, leaning in to give me a perfunctory kiss on the cheek. Get some rest, Mom. I'll call you tomorrow. After she left, I sank onto the sofa, emotionally drained. The folder Mr. Grayson had given me sat on the coffee table like a ticking bomb. Inside was the proof of my daughter's betrayal, the evidence of my husband's foresight, and the blueprint for the battle to come. I opened the separate envelope containing information about the emergency account Harold had established. Inside was a bank card, account details, and a handwritten note. Lizzie, if you're reading this, things have gotten bad with Melissa. I pray I'm wrong about her, that she'll rise to be the daughter we raised her to be. But if not, this account has $50,000 that she knows nothing about. It's yours, no conditions, no strings. Use it to protect yourself if necessary. All my love, H.
$52,000.
Not enough to live on forever, but enough to give me options, freedom, a safety net. Tears blurred my vision as I traced his handwriting with my fingertip. Even from beyond the grave, Harold was taking care of me. I went upstairs to our bedroom, my bedroom now, and opened the closet. Behind Harold's suits hung a small safe where we kept important documents and valuables. I carefully placed the bank card and account information inside, then changed into my nightgown and slid between the sheets that still smelled faintly of Harold's aftershave. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles. But tonight, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Harold's diagnosis. Strength. Not happiness, not peace, but a quiet, steely resolve. Whatever came next, I would face it for Harold, for myself, and for the daughter I still hoped might somehow find her way back to the person we had raised her to be. Melissa called every day leading up to Tuesday's meeting. Each conversation followed the same pattern, a brief inquiry about my well-being, followed by increasingly transparent attempts to discuss her investment opportunity. Each time, I deflected, saying we would talk about everything after meeting with Mr. Grayson. Her frustration grew with each call. By Monday, she wasn't bothering to hide it. Mom, this is ridiculous, she snapped after my third refusal to discuss releasing funds before Tuesday. The opportunity could be gone by then. Then, I guess we'll have to find another opportunity, I said mildly, taking a certain satisfaction in her exasperated sigh. You don't understand how these things work, she said, her tone dripping with condescension. Prime investments don't just sit around waiting. People with vision have to move quickly. People with vision, I repeated. Like you. Yes, like me, she said sharply. I've built a successful career by recognizing opportunities and acting on them. Dad understood that kind of thinking. Did he? I asked softly. Is that why he invested in your previous proposal? There was a pause, just a heartbeat too long. What are you talking about? The development project you brought to him last year, I said, watching carefully for her reaction, even though we were only on the phone. The one you said was guaranteed to triple our money. Another pause. He told you about that? We were married for 45 years, Melissa. We didn't keep secrets from each other. The lie came easily, justified by the greater truth it protected. Then you know he was being unnecessarily cautious, she said, recovering quickly. If he had invested then, we'd already be seeing returns. This opportunity is even better. Well, I said, we'll discuss it all tomorrow, after we meet with Mr. Grayson. She made a sound of pure frustration.
Fine. 10 o'clock.
I'll be there. I hung up and looked at the journal I'd been keeping since my meeting with Mr. Grayson. Following his advice, I documented every interaction with Melissa, her calls, her pressure tactics, her thinly veiled attempts to access money before the will reading. The pattern was clear and damning. That night, I slept fitfully, dreaming of Harold. In my dream, he was healthy again, sitting in his favorite chair by the window, reading glasses perched on his nose as he studied some document. I called to him, but he didn't look up, too absorbed in whatever he was reading. When I moved closer, I saw that the pages were blank. He was looking at nothing. "Harold," I said in the dream, "there's nothing there." He finally looked up, his blue eyes sad. "You have to see it for yourself, Lizzie. I can't show you." I woke with tears on my face and Harold's name on my lips. The dream lingered as I showered and dressed for the meeting, choosing a simple black dress that Harold had always liked. Conservative, dignified, armor for the battle ahead. The drive to Mr. Grayson's office was tense. I arrived 15 minutes early, parking in the same spot I had the week before. As I walked toward the building, I saw Melissa getting out of her silver BMW in the visitors section. She was wearing a tailored pantsuit in navy blue, her hair pulled back in a severe knot that made her look older than her 39 years. "Mom," she called, hurrying to catch up with me. "I was going to pick you up. You shouldn't have to drive yourself to something like this." "I'm perfectly capable of driving, Melissa," I said, pressing the elevator button. "I've been doing it for 50 years. She frowned but said nothing as we rode up to the 12th floor. Jean greeted us warmly, offering condolences to Melissa, who accepted them with a practiced gravity that didn't reach her eyes. "Mr. Grayson will be with you shortly," Jean said, gesturing to the waiting area. "Can I get either of you coffee or water?" "Nothing for me, thank you," I said, taking a seat in one of the leather armchairs. "I'll take coffee, black," Melissa said, remaining standing as she checked messages on her phone. We sat in uncomfortable silence until Mr. Grayson appeared in the doorway of his office. "Elizabeth, Melissa," he greeted us solemnly. "Thank you for coming. Please come in." His office felt different today, more formal, the heavy curtains drawn back to let in the morning light, 3 chairs arranged in front of his desk instead of the usual 2. A young woman I didn't recognize sat in a corner with a stenographer's machine. "For the record," Mr. Grayson explained, noticing my questioning look. "Standard procedure for will readings." Melissa glanced at the stenographer with barely concealed impatience. "Is all this ceremony really necessary, Mr. Grayson? We could have handled this with a simple email." "Your father's wishes were explicit, Melissa," he replied evenly. "He wanted this done formally, in person, with both of you present." She sighed but took her seat. I sat beside her, my hands folded in my lap to hide their trembling. "Now then," Mr. Grayson began, opening a folder identical to the one he'd shown me the previous week. "We are here for the reading of the last will and testament of Harold James Porter, deceased on April 14th, 2023. He began to read the formal language of the will, legal terms, declarations of sound mind, revocations of previous wills. Melissa shifted in her seat, her foot tapping an impatient rhythm on the carpeted floor. Then Mr. Grayson reached the substantive portions. "I, Harold James Porter, being of sound mind, do hereby bequeath all my worldly possessions, assets, and property to the Harold and Elizabeth Porter Family Trust, created on October 17th, 2022, the details of which are attached hereto." Melissa sat up straighter. "A trust? Dad never mentioned a trust." "Your father updated his estate plan during his illness," Mr. Grayson said without looking up from the document, "as was his right. But a trust?" She looked confused, then suspicious. "What are the terms?" Mr. Grayson continued reading. "The trust shall be managed for the primary benefit of my beloved wife, Elizabeth N. Porter, during her lifetime. She shall have complete access to all income generated by the trust assets, as well as the power to direct the sale or retention of any trust property, including our family home." Melissa's face had gone very still. "And after Mom's death? What happens then?" "Upon the death of Elizabeth and Porter," Mr. Grayson read, "the remaining trust assets shall be distributed according to the terms specified in the confidential letter attached hereto, known only to the trustee and to be revealed only at the appropriate time."
What?
Melissa stood up, her coffee cup clattering onto the desk. "That's ridiculous. A secret letter? What does it say? Who's the trustee?" "I am," Mr. Grayson said calmly, setting the will aside. And the contents of the letter are, as stated, confidential until the appropriate time. This is absurd, Melissa sputtered, looking from Mr. Grayson to me and back again. Dad would never do this. Cut me out, leave everything in some mysterious trust with secret conditions. Mom, did you know about this? I met her gaze steadily. I knew Harold was updating his will, yes. The details were explained to me after his death. And you didn't think to mention this to me? Her voice rose. Your own daughter? It wasn't my place to discuss Harold's will before the official reading, I said, the words coming out calmer than I felt. And frankly, given your behavior since his death, I'm not surprised by his decision. Her face flushed. My behavior? What is that supposed to mean? Mr. Grayson cleared his throat. If I may continue? Melissa remained standing but fell silent, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. The trust currently holds all assets formerly belonging to Harold Porter, including but not limited to the family home at 1482 Maple Lane, valued at approximately $1.2 million, investment accounts totaling $875,000, life insurance proceeds of $500,000, personal property valued at approximately $150,000, and Harold's half of joint bank accounts totaling $230,000. The numbers hung in the air between us. Nearly $3 million in total assets, all now in a trust controlled by me during my lifetime, with Melissa's eventual inheritance subject to conditions she didn't even know existed. This is wrong, she said, her voice low and dangerous. Dad would never leave me hanging like this, dependent on Mom's whims. There must be some mistake. There is no mistake, Mr. Grayson said firmly. The trust documents were properly executed, witnessed, and notarized. Your father was of sound mind when he made these decisions. I'll contest it, she threatened. I'll take this to court. Dad was on heavy medications. He wasn't thinking clearly. You have that right, Mr. Grayson acknowledged. However, should you choose that path, there is additional documentation your father prepared specifically in case of a contest. He paused, looking at her meaningfully. Documentation you might find revealing. Something in his tone made her hesitate. What documentation? That would only be disclosed in court, he said. As your father instructed. Melissa turned to me, her expression a mixture of fury and disbelief. Did you do this? Did you poison Dad against me while he was sick and vulnerable? The accusation struck like a physical blow. How dare you, I whispered. I did nothing of the sort. Harold made his own decisions. Right, she scoffed. Dad suddenly decides, after a lifetime of promising me I'd inherit everything, to lock it all up in a trust? With you having complete control? That doesn't sound like him at all. Perhaps, Mr. Grayson interjected, he saw something that concerned him. Something that made him fear for your mother's security after he was gone. Melissa's eyes narrowed. What are you implying? I'm not implying anything, he said evenly. I'm simply stating that Harold Porter was a thoughtful man who planned carefully for his family's future. The arrangements he made reflect his assessment of the situation. She turned back to me, her face hard. So that's it? You get everything, and I get, what? The possibility of an inheritance someday, if I'm a good girl, and do what Mommy says. That's not what the trust says at all, I responded, fighting to keep my voice steady. It ensures I'm taken care of for the rest of my life, as your father wanted. What happens after that depends on factors he felt were important. Factors no one will tell me about, she snapped. How convenient. Mr. Grayson closed the folder. The reading is concluded. Do either of you have questions about the technical aspects of the trust? Just one, Melissa said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. When exactly did my father decide I was so untrustworthy that I needed to be controlled from beyond the grave? Your father loved you very much, Mr. Grayson said quietly. Every decision he made was with careful consideration for both you and your mother. Clearly, she said bitterly. She grabbed her purse and turned to me. Congratulations, Mom. You won. I hope it was worth it. Before I could respond, she stormed out, the door slamming behind her with enough force to rattle the framed law degrees on the wall. I sat there, strangely calm in the aftermath of her fury. "That went about as expected," I said to Mr. Grayson. He nodded, removing his glasses to polish them with a handkerchief. "Indeed. Though I doubt we've seen the last of her anger. Are you all right to drive home? I can call you a taxi if you prefer." "I'll be fine," I assured him, gathering my purse. "What happens now?" "Now," he said, replacing his glasses, "we wait. Melissa has two choices: accept the trust as it stands, or contest the will. If she chooses the latter, we'll present Harold's documentation. Either way, you are protected. The trust is solid." I nodded, standing to leave. "Thank you, Calvin, for everything." "One more thing," he added as I reached the door. "Be careful, Elizabeth. Melissa is angry and feels betrayed. People in that state sometimes make poor choices." His warning followed me home, hovering like a storm cloud. When I pulled into my driveway, I wasn't entirely surprised to see Melissa's BMW parked on the street. She was waiting on the front porch, her posture rigid with anger. "We need to talk," she said as I approached. "I think we've said enough for one day," I replied, moving past her to unlock the door. She followed me inside. "No, we haven't. Not nearly enough. I want to know exactly what you did to convince Dad to cut me out." I set my purse down with deliberate calm. "I didn't do anything, Melissa. The decisions were your father's alone." "That's bull," she spat. "Dad always said the house would be mine after you were both gone. We talked about it for years, how I'd renovate it, maybe sell it if the market was right. He wouldn't just change everything without a reason." "Perhaps he had a reason," I said quietly. She stared at me, then let out a harsh laugh. "Oh, I see. This is about the retirement community thing, isn't it? You told him I was trying to shove you into a home, and he overreacted." "Your father was dying when he made these changes," I said, my patience wearing thin. "He had months to think about what would happen after he was gone, to consider who would protect me and who might have other priorities." Her eyes narrowed. "What exactly are you saying, Mom?" I took a deep breath. Mr. Grayson had advised against revealing the conditional nature of her inheritance, but I couldn't let her accusation stand. "I'm saying that your father saw how you behaved during his illness. How rarely you visited. How you always had an excuse to be somewhere else when he needed you, when I needed you. He saw what I was only beginning to understand, that your primary concern has always been yourself." Her face flushed crimson. "That's not fair. I have a career, a life. I couldn't just put everything on hold indefinitely." "No one asked you to put everything on hold," I countered. "We asked for your presence, your support. A few hours a week to sit with your dying father, to give me a break from caregiving. But you were always too busy, weren't you? Too important." "So, he punished me," she said bitterly. "He dangled my inheritance like a carrot, then yanked it away." "He protected me," I corrected. "He made sure I wouldn't be pressured into decisions that weren't in my best interest. Decisions like, I don't know, selling my home right after his death? Signing everything over to you for tax purposes?" Understanding dawned in her eyes. "He knew. Somehow, he knew what I would do." "He knew you," I said simply. "Better than you think." She paced the living room, running her hands through her hair in frustration. "This is insane. Nearly $3 million locked up in a trust. And for what? To teach me some kind of lesson? I'm his daughter, for God's sake." "Yes, you are," I agreed. "Which makes your behavior all the more painful." She stopped pacing and turned to face me. "What do you want from me, Mom? Seriously, what would make you happy? Daily visits? Moving in with you? Giving up my career to be your full-time companion? Because that's not going to happen." The coldness of her words, the utter lack of understanding, broke something inside me. The last shred of hope that my real daughter, the loving child I'd raised, was still in there somewhere, just waiting to emerge. What I wanted, I said quietly, was a daughter who loved me enough to care whether I lived or died. Who saw me as a person, not a problem to solve or an obstacle to wealth. Who, when her father died, would have put her arms around me and said, We'll get through this together. Tears sprang to my eyes, but I blinked them back. Instead, I got someone who told me not to be dramatic, who tried to ship me off to a retirement home before the funeral flowers had wilted, who saw her father's death as nothing but a financial opportunity. She stared at me, momentarily speechless. Then her expression hardened again. You have no idea what my life is like. The pressure, the competition, the constant struggle to stay relevant in my industry. Dad's money, my inheritance, could have changed everything for me. And that's all that matters to you, isn't it? I asked sadly. The money, not the grief or the loss or the fact that I'm alone for the first time in nearly half a century. Just what you can get from us. That's not, she started, then stopped herself. You know what?
Fine. Think whatever you want about me.
But this isn't over. That trust may control the assets now, but eventually they'll be mine. All I have to do is wait. Maybe, I said. Or maybe not. Your father was very thorough. A flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. What does that mean? I thought of the conditional clause, the foundation that would inherit everything if Melissa failed to meet Harold's standards of daughterly care. But revealing that now would only make her perform kindness for profit, not from genuine feeling. It means you should read the trust documents carefully, I said instead. All of them. She watched me with narrowed eyes, calculating. There's something you're not telling me. There are many things I'm not telling you. I agreed. Just as there are many things you haven't told me, like the real reason you need $150,000 so urgently. Her expression froze. What are you talking about? Your investment opportunity, I said, making air quotes with my fingers. The one that doesn't actually exist. Of course it exists, she insisted, but her voice lacked conviction. It's a premium development in... Stop lying, I interrupted. Your father knew all about your financial troubles. The credit card debt, the second mortgage, the personal loans. He knew everything, Melissa. The color drained from her face. That's not possible. How could he? He investigated, I said simply. After you tried to get him to invest in your last Phantom project. He was thorough, your father. Methodical. He found everything. She sank onto the sofa, looking suddenly small and very young. He had no right to pry into my finances. He had every right to know why his daughter was so desperate for money that she'd invent fake investment opportunities, I countered. Just as I have every right to protect myself from whatever scheme you're running now. For a moment, just a moment, I saw something crack in her facade, shame, perhaps, or genuine regret. But it vanished as quickly as it had appeared, replaced by the hard mask I'd grown to recognize. You have no idea what you're talking about, she said coldly. My financial situation is none of your business. It became my business when you tried to use me to solve your problems, I replied. When you tried to pressure me out of my home days after burying my husband. She stood up abruptly. This conversation is pointless. You've clearly made up your mind about me. And you've clearly shown me who you are, I said quietly. The question is, what happens next? She grabbed her purse, her movements jerky with suppressed rage. What happens next is I talk to my lawyer. That trust might not be as ironclad as Grayson thinks. Be careful, Melissa, I warned. Your father left provisions for exactly this situation. If you contest the will, certain documents will become public record. Documents you might prefer to keep private. She paused at the door, her back to me. Are you threatening me? I'm stating facts, I said. Just as your father did in his documentation. She turned, her expression cold and calculating. You know what, Mom? Keep the damn money. Keep the house. Hide behind Dad's trust and his lawyer and his precious documents. But don't expect me to play the dutiful daughter anymore. You've made your choice. No, Melissa, I said sadly. You made yours a long time ago. I just refused to see it until now. She yanked the door open. Goodbye, Mother. Enjoy your victory. The door slammed behind her with such force that a framed photo fell from the wall. Harold, Melissa, and me at her college graduation. The glass shattered across the hardwood floor, a perfect metaphor for what had just happened to our family. I stood there for a long time, looking at our smiling faces amid the broken glass. Then slowly, methodically, I began to clean up the mess, just as I would have to clean up the mess of my life without Harold. And now, it seemed, without Melissa as well. That night, I couldn't sleep. Melissa's words echoed in my head, mixing with Harold's letter and Mr. Grayson's warnings. Had I done the right thing? Had Harold? Was there any way to salvage the relationship with my daughter, or had greed and resentment poisoned it beyond repair? Around 3 in the morning, I gave up on sleep and went downstairs to make tea. The house felt cavernous around me, too big for one person, just as Melissa had said. Maybe she'd been right about that much. Maybe I should downsize, find something more manageable. But that would be my choice, made in my time, not under pressure from a daughter who saw me as nothing but an obstacle to wealth. The kettle whistled, startling me from my thoughts. As I poured hot water over a tea bag, my cell phone rang. Who would be calling at this hour? My heart raced. Had something happened to Melissa? The screen showed an unfamiliar number. I hesitated, then answered. Hello? Mrs. Porter? A man's voice. Unfamiliar. Elizabeth Porter? Yes, who is this? This is Officer Ramirez with the Metro Police Department. I'm sorry to disturb you at this hour, but there's been an incident at your property. My blood ran cold. What property? What incident? Your home, ma'am. 1482 Maple Lane. We've responded to an alarm call. There appears to have been a break-in. The security company contacted us when no one answered at your number. A break-in? I repeated numbly. But I'm home. I didn't hear any alarm. Are you sure you have the right address? Yes, ma'am. 1482 Maple Lane. There was a pause, the sound of papers shuffling. The alarm was triggered in what's listed as the home office. First floor, rear of the house. Harold's study. My heart pounded as I glanced toward the darkened hallway that led to that room, the room I'd barely entered since his death, except to retrieve his letter. I'm upstairs in the kitchen. I lied, not wanting to admit I was alone on the first floor, potentially near an intruder. I didn't hear anything. Stay where you are, ma'am, the officer said firmly. We have units on scene securing the perimeter. Is there anyone else in the house with you?
No, y whisperat.
I'm alone. All right. Lock the door of the room you're in and stay on the line. My officers will clear the house before coming to find you. I moved quietly to the kitchen door and turned the lock, then retreated to the furthest corner, clutching the phone like a lifeline. Has anyone been caught? I asked, my voice barely audible. Not yet, ma'am. But we've got the house surrounded. If someone's still inside, they're not getting out. Minutes ticked by, each one stretching into an eternity. I could hear faint shouts outside, the crackle of police radios, the heavy tread of boots on my front porch. Then a pounding at the front door. Police. Open up. They're at the door, I told Officer Ramirez. That's my team, ma'am. They'll identify themselves and ask for your name. You can hang up now. You're in good hands. I ended the call and crept toward the front of the house, still staying well back from the door. Who is it? I called, though I knew the answer. Metro Police, ma'am. Can you identify yourself? Elizabeth Porter. This is my home. There was a brief consultation on the other side of the door then. Mrs. Porter, we need you to open the door so we can verify your identity. Please do so slowly and keep your hands visible. I unlocked the door with trembling fingers and opened it to find 2 officers with flashlights and drawn weapons. They quickly holstered their guns when they saw me, a terrified older woman in a bathrobe. Sorry for the alarm, ma'am, the taller one said, showing me his badge. Officer Wilson. This is Officer Chen. We need to check your ID to confirm you're the homeowner. I retrieved my wallet from my purse and showed them my driver's license. Once satisfied, they explained the situation. Your security company reported a glass break alarm in your home office, followed by motion detection. We've cleared most of the house, but we're still checking out buildings and the yard. It appears the perpetrator may have fled when the alarm sounded. Can I see what happened? I asked, clutching my robe tighter around myself. Officer Chen hesitated. It might be better to wait until we've fully secured the scene, ma'am. Please, I insisted. It's my husband's study. I need to know. They exchanged glances, then nodded. Stay behind us, Officer Wilson instructed. They led me down the hallway to Harold's study, flashlights illuminating the path, though I could have walked it blindfolded after 40 years in this house. When we reached the door, Officer Wilson pushed it open slowly. The beam of his flashlight revealed chaos. The window behind Harold's desk had been smashed, glass glittering across the hardwood floor. Books had been swept from shelves, papers scattered everywhere. The filing cabinet drawers stood open, their contents dumped onto the floor. But worst of all was the desk itself. The locked drawer had been pried open, splintering the beautiful cherrywood Harold had so lovingly maintained. "Oh my God," I whispered, one hand flying to my mouth. "Please don't touch anything, ma'am," Officer Chin reminded me gently. "This is now a crime scene. We'll need to dust for prints, take photos." I nodded mutely, still staring at the destruction. Harold's sanctuary, his private space, violated and ransacked. I knew immediately what the intruder had been looking for, the same thing Melissa had been trying to get her hands on since the funeral. Documents. Financial information. Access to money. "Do you know if anything was taken?" Officer Wilson asked, pulling out a notepad. I stepped carefully into the room, mindful of the glass, and surveyed the damage more closely. The computer was still there. The small safe in the corner appeared untouched. But the contents of Harold's desk, especially that locked drawer, were strewn everywhere. "I'm not sure," I admitted. "My husband passed away recently. This was his office. I haven't been in here much since he died." Officer Chen's expression softened with sympathy. "I'm sorry for your loss, ma'am. When you feel up to it, you can check if anything valuable is missing. For now, we'll need to take your statement and secure the house." Over the next hour, more officers arrived. They took photographs, dusted for fingerprints, measured the broken window. I sat at the kitchen table, answering questions in a daze, still wrapped in my robe though dawn was beginning to lighten the sky. "Do you have any idea who might have done this?" the detective who had joined the initial officers asked. His name was Morrow, a grave, middle-aged man with kind eyes and a voice that reminded me of Harold's. I hesitated. Did I know? I had suspicions, certainly. But to voice them, to accuse my own daughter of breaking into my home, felt like crossing a line from which there could be no return. "I'm not sure," I said finally. "My husband recently passed away. His will was read yesterday. Perhaps someone thought there might be valuables or documents worth stealing." Detective Morrow watched me carefully. Was the reading of the will contentious in any way? My eyes filled with tears that I couldn't hold back. "My daughter was upset," I admitted. "She had expected different provisions than what my husband arranged." He nodded, making a note. "And where was your daughter last night, if you don't mind my asking?" "I don't know," I said truthfully. "We had an argument yesterday afternoon. She left angry. I haven't heard from her since." "I see." He wrote something else down. "And would your daughter have any knowledge of what might be kept in that particular room? The one that was targeted?" A sob escaped before I could stop it. "It was my husband's study. She grew up in this house." Of course she knew. Detective Morrow set his notebook aside and leaned forward slightly. "Mrs. Porter, I need to ask you directly. Do you believe your daughter might be involved in this break-in?" The question hung in the air between us, impossible to evade. I thought of Melissa's cold fury at the will reading, her desperate need for money, her final words before storming out. I thought of Harold's warnings, of Mr. Grayson's caution. And I thought of the precise targeting of the office. Not the living room with its expensive electronics, not the bedroom with my modest jewelry. Just Harold's study, with its files and documents. "I don't want to believe it," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. "But I can't rule it out." He nodded, his expression compassionate but professional. "We'll need her contact information then, just to ask her some routine questions." I gave him Melissa's cell number and address, each digit feeling like a betrayal. When the police finally left around 7 in the morning, promising to post an officer outside for the rest of the day and to board up the broken window, I was exhausted beyond words. The house felt violated, unsafe. I couldn't bear to look at Harold's destroyed study. Couldn't face cleaning up the mess. Instead, I called Mr. Grayson's office and left a message explaining what had happened, then crawled into bed, pulling the covers over my head like a child hiding from monsters. When I woke, the afternoon sun was streaming through the windows. For one blessed moment, I forgot everything. Harold's death, Melissa's betrayal, the break-in. Then reality crashed back, and I lay there, wondering how my life had unraveled so completely in just a few weeks. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. Mr. Grayson returning my call. "Elizabeth," he said when I answered, his voice tight with concern. "I got your message. Are you all right?" "Physically, yes," I said, sitting up and pushing hair from my face. "Emotionally, I'm not sure. I'm sending someone over right now to properly secure that window and change all your locks," he said. "My cousin owns a security company. They'll be there within the hour." "Thank you," I said, too drained to argue. "Calvin, do you think Melissa did this?" He was silent for a moment. "I think," he said carefully, "that desperate people sometimes make terrible choices. Has she contacted you since the break-in?"
No.
"The police wanted her information, but I haven't heard from her." "That may be telling in itself," he observed. "Elizabeth, I hate to ask this, but did the intruder find anything important? Anything that might compromise the trust or your security?" I hadn't even checked. After giving my statement, I'd been too overwhelmed to inventory the damage. "I don't know. I couldn't bear to look closely." "Understandable," he said gently. "But we should make sure. The most important documents are safely in my office, of course, but if Harold kept copies or other sensitive information at home..." "I'll check," I promised. "After your security people leave."
Good.
"And Elizabeth? Don't stay in that house alone tonight. Do you have a friend you could stay with? Or someone who could come stay with you?" I thought about it. Most of our close friends had been couples, Harold's and mine together. Since his illness, those friendships had quietly faded, the other couples perhaps uncomfortable with the reminder of mortality, or simply unsure how to relate to half of a pair. My sister lived across the country. My neighbor, Mrs. Abernathy, was kind but 85 herself and hard of hearing.
It'll be fine, Elite.
"The police have someone watching the house." "Only for today," he reminded me. "Look, my wife and I have a guest room. Why don't you pack a bag and come stay with us for a few days? Just until things settle down." His kindness brought fresh tears to my eyes. "I couldn't impose like that. It's not an imposition," he insisted. "Margaret would love the company. She's been worried about you since Harold passed." In the end, I agreed, not for my own comfort, but because the thought of spending another night in the violated house was unbearable. After Mr. Grayson's security team installed new locks, a proper alarm system, and reinforced windows, I packed a small suitcase and locked up the house, leaving a lamp on in the living room to suggest occupancy. As I backed out of the driveway, I noticed a familiar silver BMW parked down the street, partially hidden by a large SUV. My heart pounded. Was Melissa watching the house, waiting for me to leave, so she could try again? Or was I becoming paranoid, seeing threats where there were none? I drove to the Graysons' comfortable Tudor home in a quiet suburb, my mind racing with questions. Why hadn't Melissa called? If she was innocent, wouldn't she have reached out after hearing about the break-in? And if she was guilty, what had she been looking for? What did she think Harold had hidden in that desk? Margaret Grayson greeted me with a warm hug and no questions, showing me to a pleasant guest room with fresh flowers on the dresser. "Dinner's at 6, she said. "Until then, rest. You look exhausted, my dear." I was. Bone deep, soul deep exhausted. I lay down on the unfamiliar bed and fell into dreamless sleep, waking only when Margaret gently knocked to announce dinner. Over a simple but delicious meal of roast chicken and vegetables, Calvin briefed his wife on the situation. She listened with mounting concern, occasionally reaching over to pat my hand. "The trust is secure," Calvin assured me again. "Even if Melissa found documents at your house, they wouldn't give her access to anything important. The legal papers are all in my office safe." "But why break in at all?" Margaret wondered. What could she have been looking for? I pushed food around my plate, my appetite gone. Maybe evidence of Harold's claims about her finances. He kept records of everything. Calvin nodded thoughtfully. That would make sense. If she's planning to contest the will, she'd want to eliminate anything that could damage her case. But to break into her mother's home, Margaret exclaimed, genuinely shocked. I can't imagine. Neither could I, and yet the calculated coldness Melissa had shown since Harold's death suggested a stranger where my daughter had once been. A woman capable of things I'd never believed possible. My phone rang, interrupting my dark thoughts. Melissa's name flashed on the screen. It's her, I said, staring at the phone as if it might burn me. Calvin and Margaret exchanged glances. You don't have to answer, Margaret said gently. But if I don't, I reasoned, I'll never know what she wants, what she's thinking. Put it on speaker, Calvin suggested. We'll be silent, but this way you have witnesses to whatever she says. I nodded and pressed the answer button, then the speaker icon. Hello. Mom. Melissa's voice was carefully neutral. Where are you? I stopped by the house, but you're not there. There's a new alarm system. I'm staying with friends for a few days, I said, watching Calvin, who nodded encouragingly. There was a break-in at the house last night. Didn't the police call you? A pause. Yes, they did. That's partly why I'm calling. Are you okay? Physically, yes, I said, echoing what I'd told Calvin earlier. Emotionally, I'm a wreck. Someone broke into your father's study, Melissa. They destroyed it. All his books, his papers, his desk, the desk your grandfather made. It's all ruined. Another pause, longer this time. That's awful. Did they take anything? The lack of surprise in her voice, the immediate question about what might be missing rather than concern for my well-being, it all confirmed my worst fears. I don't know yet, I said carefully. I couldn't bear to check. The police are investigating. Well, good. I hope they catch whoever did it. Her voice sounded strained, artificial. Listen, Mom, about yesterday. I said some things I shouldn't have. Yes, I agreed. You did. I was upset about the will. I still am, if I'm being honest. But breaking into the house, that's not the way to handle it. I want you to know I had nothing to do with that. I closed my eyes, pain washing through me at the lie. Because it had to be a lie. The timing, the target, her careful non-surprise at the news, it all pointed to her involvement. The police will find whoever did it, I said, unable to directly accuse her despite everything. They took fingerprints, shoe impressions, fiber samples. Good, she repeated, but I heard the undercurrent of fear. Anyway, I was calling to apologize, I guess, for how I acted. Grief makes people do crazy things sometimes. Yes, I said quietly. It does. So, we're okay? She asked, her tone suggesting she expected easy forgiveness, as she had received all her life for every transgression. No, Melissa, I said, finding strength in Calvin and Margaret's supportive presence. We're not okay. You called me dramatic for grieving my husband. You tried to force me from my home days after his funeral. You attempted to manipulate me into giving you money under false pretenses. And now someone has violated my home, targeting the exact place where your father kept his private papers. We are very far from okay. Silence stretched between us. Then, I see. You're blaming me for the break-in without any proof. After everything I've done for you and Dad. What exactly have you done for us, Melissa? I asked, genuine curiosity breaking through my anger. Because from where I sit, you've been absent when we needed you most and present only when you wanted something. That's not fair, she protested. I have my own life, my own problems. You have no idea what I've been dealing with while you've been playing the grieving widow. Playing? I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. You think I'm playing at grief? Calvin shook his head in disbelief, while Margaret's hand flew to her mouth. That came out wrong. Melissa backpedaled quickly. I just meant. I know exactly what you meant, I interrupted. And I think this conversation is over. If the police have more questions for you about the break-in, I'm sure they'll be in touch. Are you threatening me? She demanded, her conciliatory tone vanishing. Your own daughter? I'm stating facts, I said. using the same words I'd used before she stormed out yesterday. The investigation will go where the evidence leads. You'll regret this, she said, her voice dropping to a hiss. Turning against me, choosing Dad's paranoid delusions over your own child. When you need me, and you will, Mom, you absolutely will, don't bother calling. She hung up. I set the phone down carefully on the table, my hands shaking. Well, Calvin said after a moment, I think we can guess who is behind the break-in. Margaret reached over and squeezed my hand. I'm so sorry, Elizabeth. No mother should have to face this from her child. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. The finality of it, the complete rupture of the mother-daughter bond, was almost harder to bear than Harold's death. At least with him, I'd had time to prepare, to say goodbye, to treasure final moments. With Melissa, it was as if the daughter I thought I knew had never existed at all. What happens now? I asked finally, looking to Calvin. With the trust, with the house, with everything? Now, he said gently, you focus on healing. Both from Harold's loss and from this betrayal. The trust is secure. Your home will be repaired and protected. And as for Melissa, well, she's made her choice. The consequences will follow in due course. That night, in the Graysons' guest room, I finally allowed myself to grieve, not just for Harold, but for the daughter I had lost in a different, perhaps more painful way. I cried until there were no tears left, until exhaustion pulled me under into restless sleep. I stayed with the Graysons for 5 days. In that time, the police completed their investigation of the break-in, confirming what we already suspected. The intruder had known exactly what they were looking for, had bypassed valuable electronics and jewelry, and had focused solely on Harold's documents. They found partial fingerprints that weren't conclusive enough for court, but matched those of a family member. No charges were filed, but Detective Morrow made it clear to me privately that they believed Melissa was involved, either directly or by hiring someone. We just can't prove it beyond reasonable doubt, he explained apologetically. Not without more evidence. Calvin's security team fully upgraded my home. New locks, window sensors, cameras, motion detectors, even reinforced door frames. The cost was considerable, but Calvin insisted on paying from the trust. Harold would want you to be safe, he said firmly when I protested. This is exactly the kind of expense the trust is designed to cover. When I finally returned home, the house felt different, safer in a physical sense, but emotionally altered. Harold's study had been cleaned and restored as much as possible, but the violated feeling lingered. I couldn't bring myself to sit at his desk, to occupy the space that had been so uniquely his. Instead, I began to carve out my own spaces. I converted the small sunroom off the kitchen into a reading nook, filling it with comfortable cushions, good lighting, and books I'd always meant to read, but never found time for. I joined a grief support group at the community center, forcing myself to go even when all I wanted was to hide under the covers. Slowly, painfully, I began to build a new life, a solo life, in the home where I'd been half of a couple for decades. I learned to fix minor household problems, to manage the yard work with the help of a neighborhood teenager, to handle the finances Harold had always managed. Each small victory gave me strength for the next challenge. Melissa didn't call again. Occasionally, I'd see her silver BMW driving slowly past the house, but she never stopped, never approached. I learned from Calvin, who heard through professional circles, that she had consulted several attorneys about contesting the will, but none would take her case once they reviewed Harold's documentation. She's effectively blocked, he told me during one of our regular check-in meetings. Unless she can prove Harold was mentally incompetent when he updated his will, which she can't, given his doctor's thorough assessment, she has no grounds to challenge the trust. And the condition? I asked. The one about how she treats me? He smiled sadly. Still in effect. Still confidential. And based on her behavior so far, he didn't need to finish the sentence. We both knew what Harold's judgment would be. 2 months after the break-in, on a crisp autumn day that would have been Harold's 69th birthday, I received a certified letter. The return address was an attorney's office I didn't recognize. Inside was a formal notice. Melissa had filed a lawsuit against me personally, separate from the will contest, claiming emotional distress and defamation related to my supposedly false accusations about the break-in. I called Calvin immediately. He arrived within the hour, reviewed the documents, and snorted in disgust. "This is desperation, pure and simple," he said, setting the papers aside. "She can't get at the trust, so she's trying to force you to settle just to make her go away. It's a nuisance suit, nothing more." "But I'll have to defend it," I said, anxiety knotting my stomach. "Court appearances, legal fees." "The trust will cover all of that," he assured me. "And I know exactly the litigation attorney to handle this. Don't worry, Elizabeth. Harold anticipated something like this might happen. That's why the trust is structured to protect you from exactly these kinds of attacks." I nodded, trying to take comfort in his confidence. But the reality of my own daughter suing me, trying to extract money through legal intimidation when manipulation had failed, was a new low I hadn't anticipated. What kind of person does this? I asked, more to myself than to Calvin. What happened to the child I raised? He had no answer for that. None of us did. The lawsuit dragged on for weeks, each filing more outrageous than the last. Melissa claimed I had falsely accused her to the police, that I had conspired with Harold to disinherit her, that I had caused her professional reputation to suffer through my vendetta. The allegations were absurd, but they still required responses, depositions, legal maneuvering. Through it all, I kept putting one foot in front of the other. The grief support group became a lifeline. Other widows and widowers who understood the empty space beside me in bed, the conversations with a ghost in an empty room, the small daily deaths of habits no longer needed. I made new friends, cautiously at first, then with increasing openness. One of them, a retired English professor named Thomas, whose wife had died of the same cancer that took Harold, became especially dear. He understood my silences, respected my grief, and never pushed for more than I could give. We went to museums together, to concerts at the park, to quiet dinners where conversation flowed easily or silence rested comfortably between us. He liked Thomas, I told Harold one night, speaking aloud to his photograph beside my bed. "He quotes Hemingway, just like you used to." It was 6 months after Harold's death when things came to a head. The lawsuit had reached the deposition phase, and I was scheduled to testify under oath about the break-in, my suspicions, the will, reading all of it. Calvin had coached me thoroughly, and the litigation attorney he'd hired, a sharp-minded woman named Serena James, had prepared me for every possible question. The night before the deposition, I couldn't sleep. I paced the house, touching familiar objects, drawing strength from the home Harold and I had built together. Around midnight, my doorbell rang. I froze. No one would come calling at this hour with good intentions. Through the security system Calvin had installed, I checked the front door camera. Melissa stood on the porch, swaying slightly, her appearance disheveled in a way I'd never seen before. Her normally perfect hair was limp, her clothes wrinkled. Even through the camera, I could see she'd been crying. My first instinct was to rush to the door, to gather my child in my arms as I had when she was small and hurting. But the months of manipulation, the break-in, the lawsuit, all of it held me back. This could be another trap, another attempt to get something from me. I used the intercom feature. "Melissa? It's midnight. What are you doing here?" She looked up at the camera, her eyes bloodshot.
Mom?
"Can I come in? Please? I need to talk to you." "It's very late," I said cautiously, "and given the lawsuit, my attorney has advised me not to speak with you directly." She laughed, a hollow sound nothing like her usual confident tone. "The lawsuit?"
Right.
"That's actually why I'm here." I hesitated. Every instinct warned me to keep the door closed, to protect myself from whatever new scheme she might be running. But some deeper part, the mother who remembered a gap-toothed smile, a little hand in mine, a child who once loved me without condition, couldn't turn her away without at least hearing what she had to say. "I'll open the door," I said finally, "but I'm recording this conversation for my protection." She nodded, wiping at her eyes. "Fair enough." I disarmed the alarm and opened the door, keeping the security chain in place. Up close, Melissa looked even worse, thinner than I remembered, with dark circles under her eyes and a pallor that spoke of sleepless nights. "You look terrible," I said before I could stop myself. She laughed again, that same empty sound.
Yeah, well.
"Turns out destroying your life is pretty exhausting." I studied her, trying to see past the bitterness to whatever had brought her to my door at midnight. "What do you want, Melissa? Can I come in?" she asked again. "Please?" "I promise I'm not here to cause problems. Just the opposite, actually." Against my better judgment, I closed the door, removed the chain, and reopened it. She stepped inside, glancing around as if seeing the house for the first time. "You've changed things," she observed. "It looks nice." "Thank you," I said stiffly, leading her to the living room. "Now, why are you here?" She sank onto the sofa, suddenly looking very young and very lost. "I'm dropping the lawsuit," she said without preamble. "I told my lawyer this afternoon. He'll file the dismissal papers tomorrow." I sat down across from her, stunned.
Why?
"What's changed?" She stared at her hands for a long moment before answering. "Everything. Nothing." She looked up at me, her eyes swimming with tears. "I hit rock bottom, Mom.
Lost my job.
Lost my loft. I'm living in a studio apartment that makes a shoebox look spacious. My credit is destroyed. My so-called friends have disappeared. And for what? A lawsuit everyone told me I couldn't win, pursuing money I'll probably never see, all while destroying the last family connection I have left." The raw pain in her voice seemed genuine. But I'd been fooled before, manipulated by this same woman who could turn tears on and off like a faucet when it suited her purposes. "I'm sorry you're struggling," I said carefully. "But I have to ask, why come to me with this? Why not just have your lawyer inform mine about dropping the suit?" She wiped at her eyes. "Because I owe you more than that. I owe you the truth." She took a deep breath. "I did it. The break-in. Not personally, I hired someone. A guy who does odd jobs for cash. I told him exactly what to look for, where Dad kept his important papers." Though I'd suspected, known really, hearing her admit it still felt like a physical blow. "Why?" I whispered. "Your own home, Melissa. The home you grew up in." "Because I was desperate," she cried. "I owed money to people you don't want to owe money to. People who don't send late notices. They send men to break your fingers. I needed cash fast, and Dad's papers were my only hope of finding a way around that trust." "The debt," I began, remembering what Mr. Grayson had told me. "Was worse than you knew," she finished. "Much worse. I made some bad investments, took out loans to cover other loans. It spiraled. By the time Dad died, I was underwater by almost $500,000. The amount shocked me. $500,000? How is that even possible?" She laughed bitterly. "It's amazing how fast you can destroy your life when you're really committed to it. The real estate market took a hit. I made some panic moves, borrowed from the wrong people. Classic downward spiral." I tried to process what she was saying. So the break-in was a desperate attempt to find anything I could use, either to pressure you into releasing funds or to contest the will. But all I got was confirmation of what you and Mr. Grayson told me. Dad knew everything. He had records of all my failed ventures, my mounting debt, even transcripts of conversations where I'd tried to manipulate him into investing. She rubbed her face, looking exhausted beyond words. The lawsuit was my Hail Mary, one last desperate attempt to force a settlement. But even my own lawyer finally admitted it was hopeless. He withdrew from the case today. I sat back, letting her words sink in. If what she was saying was true, and it aligned with everything Calvin and Harold had discovered, then Melissa had truly hit bottom. The question was whether this midnight confession was genuine remorse or simply another angle of attack. "Why tell me all this now?" I asked. "You must realize this confession could have legal consequences." She nodded. "I know, and I'm prepared for that. If you want to call the police right now, I won't fight it." She gestured to my phone on the coffee table. "Go ahead. I deserve it." The offer seemed genuine, another first in these bitter months since Harold's death. I studied my daughter, trying to see past the manipulator to the child I'd once known. Was she still in there somewhere? I'm not calling the police, I said finally. At least not tonight. But I need to understand, Melissa. When did money become more important than family, than basic human decency? She flinched as if I'd slapped her. It wasn't about the money. Not really. It was about not failing, not losing everything I'd built. My whole identity was wrapped up in being successful, in proving I could make it on my own. When it all started crumbling, I couldn't face it, couldn't admit I'd failed. So instead you tried to take what wasn't yours, I said, the pieces finally falling into place. You saw your father's death as an opportunity to solve your problems. I saw it as my only way out, she corrected, her voice small. I told myself you didn't need all that money anyway. That dad would have wanted to help me if he'd known how bad things really were. I convinced myself I was entitled to it. But Harold did know, I reminded her. That's why he set up the trust the way he did. He saw what was happening to you. She nodded, fresh tears spilling. I know that now. Reading his notes during the break-in, it was like he was speaking to me from beyond, telling me he'd seen through every lie, every manipulation. And still, he gave me a chance. That conditional inheritance clause. I stiffened. You know about that. It was in his files, she admitted. The complete trust document, including the condition that I treat you with the care and respect a daughter should show her mother, particularly during your time of grief. She let out a hollow laugh. I've done exactly the opposite, haven't I? Guaranteed my own disinheritance through my actions. I didn't deny it. We both knew it was true. So what now? I asked. You dropped the lawsuit and then what?
What do you want from me, Melissa?
She looked at me directly, her eyes red but clear.
Nothing.
I don't expect anything from you. Not money, not forgiveness, not even understanding. I just wanted you to know that I finally see what I've done. To you, to myself, to Dad's memory. I hit bottom, and in that dark place, I finally saw the truth. I wanted to believe her. After months of manipulation and lies, I desperately wanted to believe my daughter had found her way back to something real, something true. But trust, once shattered, isn't easily rebuilt. Words are easy, I said quietly. Especially for you. You've always known exactly what to say to get what you want. She winced, but didn't argue. You're right.
I have.
But I'm not asking you to believe me based on words. I'll prove it with actions over time, if you'll let me try. And if I won't, if I can't risk being hurt by you again, then I'll understand, she said simply. I'll file the dismissal tomorrow, regardless. And I'll find some other way to make amends, to show you and myself that I can be better than this person I've become. The sincerity in her voice made something inside me waver, the protective wall I'd built against her since Harold's death. Could I risk lowering it even a little? Could I open myself to the possibility that my daughter might find her way back? I need time, I said finally. This isn't something I can decide tonight. She nodded, standing up. I understand. Thank you for listening at least. For not calling the police immediately. I haven't ruled that out yet. I reminded her. What you did, breaking into my home, destroying your father's things, that was a crime, Melissa. I know, she said quietly. And if pressing charges is what you need to do, I won't fight it. I needed you to hear the truth from me, not from lawyers or police reports. As she moved toward the door, I noticed again how thin she looked, how exhausted. Are you safe? I asked before I could stop myself. You mentioned owing money to dangerous people. She paused, surprised by the question. I've worked out payment arrangements. It's not ideal, but I'm not in immediate danger. She attempted a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Just broke. Very, very broke. I nodded, not offering financial help. That boundary, at least, needed to remain firm. Drive carefully, I said instead as she stepped onto the porch. She turned back, her expression vulnerable in a way I hadn't seen since she was a child. I am sorry, Mom, for everything. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I am. I didn't say I forgave her. I couldn't, not yet, maybe not ever completely. But I did say, "Good night, Melissa," in a tone gentler than any I'd used with her since before Harold died. After she left, I sat in the living room for a long time, replaying our conversation. Was her remorse genuine, or another performance? Had she truly hit bottom, or was this a new approach when all others had failed? I simply didn't know. I called Calvin first thing the next morning, recounting the midnight visit and Melissa's confession. "It's certainly unexpected," he said cautiously, "but consistent with what we've suspected all along about her financial situation." "Do you think she's sincere?" I asked, valuing his measured judgment.
He sighed.
"It's possible. People sometimes do have genuine epiphanies when they've lost everything. The question is whether you want to risk finding out. And the break-in? Should I press charges now that I have a confession?" "Legally, you could," he confirmed. "But given that she's your daughter, that's a personal decision only you can make, Elizabeth." I thought about it all day, weighing justice against mercy, protection against possibility. By evening, I'd made my decision. I called Melissa, the first time I'd initiated contact since before the will reading. "Mom," she answered, surprise evident in her voice. "Is everything okay?" "I've been thinking about our conversation last night," I said, skipping pleasantries. "About your confession regarding the break-in." She was quiet for a moment. "I meant what I said. All of it. I've decided not to press charges," I told her. "Not because I fully trust your change of heart, but because your father always believed in second chances. He gave you one with that conditional clause, even knowing what you'd done." "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "But understand this," I continued firmly. "This is your one chance, Melissa. If you're playing me, if this is another manipulation—" "It's not," she interrupted. "I swear to you it's not." "Then prove it," I said simply. "Not with words or tears or midnight confessions. With consistent actions over time." "I will," she promised. "However long it takes." "Good," I said. "Now I have a proposition for you." "A proposition?" She sounded wary. "The garden needs work," I said. "The lawn, the flower beds, all of it. Harold always handled the heavy outdoor maintenance, and I've been paying a neighborhood boy, but it's getting to be too much for him. You need money, I need help. 2 hours every Saturday, at a fair hourly rate. No advances, no loans, just honest work for honest pay." There was silence on the other end. Then, to my surprise, she laughed, a genuine sound I hadn't heard in years. "You're offering me a job as your gardener?" "I'm offering you a way to rebuild trust," I corrected. "One Saturday at a time. Take it or leave it." "I'll take it," she said quickly. "Though I should warn you, I know nothing about gardening." "Harold's books are still in the garage," I told her. "You can start there. 9 o'clock Saturday morning. Don't be late." After we hung up, I wasn't sure if I'd made the right decision. But it felt right, a small step toward possible reconciliation that protected me while offering Melissa a path to prove herself. I called Calvin to inform him of our arrangement. He was cautiously supportive. "It gives her a structured way to demonstrate change without putting you at financial risk," he observed. "Quite clever, actually." "We'll see," I said, not ready to claim wisdom or foresight. "It might blow up in my face. Or it might be the beginning of healing," he suggested gently. Saturday arrived with clear skies and mild temperatures, perfect gardening weather. At precisely 9, my doorbell rang. Melissa stood on the porch in jeans and a t-shirt, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, looking nothing like the polished real estate agent I'd grown accustomed to. "Reporting for duty," she said with a hesitant smile. "I read 3 chapters of Dad's gardening book last night." "Good," I said, leading her around to the garage where I'd set out tools, gloves, and a handwritten list of tasks. "We'll start with the basics. Weeding the flower beds, trimming the shrubs, mowing the lawn." She looked at the overgrown yard and nodded, pulling on the gloves I'd provided. "Where do you want me to start?" "The flower bed by the front porch," I decided. "Those were your father's prize roses. They've been neglected since he got sick." For the next 2 hours, I watched from the kitchen window as my daughter, my successful, manicured, always impeccable daughter, knelt in the dirt, pulling weeds, carefully pruning dead branches, working with a focus I hadn't seen from her in years. She didn't complain, didn't ask for breaks, didn't check her phone. She just worked steadily, referring occasionally to Harold's gardening book I'd left open on the porch steps. At 11, I brought out lemonade, Harold's recipe, tart and sweet in perfect balance. She accepted the glass gratefully, wiping sweat from her brow with the back of her arm. "How am I doing?" she asked, gesturing to the half-cleared flower bed. "Better than I expected," I admitted. "You've got his touch with the roses." A flash of genuine pleasure crossed her face at the comparison to her father. "Really?" I was worried I was being too aggressive with the pruning. "No, you're doing it just right. Roses need a firm hand." I surveyed the work she'd completed. Another hour should finish this bed. But our agreement was 2 hours, so we'll leave the rest for next week. She glanced at her watch, surprised. "It's been 2 hours already? Time flies when you're pulling weeds," I said dryly. She laughed, another genuine sound that reminded me of the daughter I'd once known. It's oddly satisfying, actually, seeing immediate results. I nodded, understanding. In real estate, results often took months. In gardening, you could see the difference in hours. Your father felt the same way. He said gardening kept him humble and patient. 2 qualities I could use more of, she acknowledged, setting down her empty glass. I went inside and returned with an envelope containing the agreed-upon payment. "Same time next week?" She took the envelope and nodded. "I'll be here. And Mom, thank you for the chance." I didn't say you're welcome or I forgive you.
It was too soon for that.
Instead, I simply nodded and went back inside, leaving her to gather the tools and clean up. That evening, Thomas called to invite me to a symphony performance the following weekend. As we talked, I found myself telling him about Melissa's visit, her confession, our new Saturday arrangement. "It's a start," he said thoughtfully. "A small one, but meaningful. Gardening together was how my son and I reconnected after his addiction issues. Something about working the earth together, it helps heal human connections too." His understanding comforted me. "I'm not sure I can ever fully trust her again," I admitted. "But I want to give her the chance Harold would have wanted her to have." "That's all any of us can do," he said gently. "Give chances, set boundaries, and see what grows." The next Saturday, Melissa arrived promptly at 9, dressed for work again, this time with her own pair of gardening gloves and a wide-brimmed hat. "The garden store clerk said this would protect my face from sun damage," she explained when she saw me eyeing the hat. "Apparently, I have fair skin prone to sunspots." The old Melissa would have been horrified at the thought of garden work damaging her complexion. This new version seemed to be approaching it practically, prepared rather than deterred. Week by week, the routine continued. 2 hours every Saturday, rain or shine. When it poured one weekend, we cleaned out the garage instead, sorting through Harold's neatly organized tools, reminiscing about projects he'd completed around the house. On sunny days, Melissa tackled increasingly complex garden tasks, installing a small water feature, building a raised bed for vegetables, transplanting perennials to create a more cohesive design. We didn't talk much at first. The work itself was our communication, her consistent appearance each Saturday speaking louder than words could have. Gradually, though, a conversation began to flow, cautiously at first, then with increasing ease. I learned about her new job as an administrative assistant at a small property management company. A huge step down from where I was, but honest work with regular hours. She found an even smaller apartment, but one in a safer neighborhood. She was attending debtors' anonymous meetings twice weekly. Small revelations, offered without drama or expectation. And in return, I cautiously shared bits of my new life. The grief support group, my friendship with Thomas, the book club I'd joined at the library. It was during our 6th Saturday, as we planted bulbs for spring flowers, that Melissa asked the question I'd been dreading. "Do you think you'll ever be able to forgive me, Mom? Truly forgive me?" I sat back on my heels, buying time by brushing dirt from my gloves. The answer mattered to both of us. I'm working on it, I said honestly. Some days I think I already have. Other days, when I remember how you treated me after your father died, what you did to this house. I shook my head. It's a process, Melissa, not an event. She nodded, accepting this without argument. That's fair. More than fair, actually. We continued planting in companionable silence for a while before she spoke again. Can I ask you something else? About Dad's conditional clause? I tensed slightly. What about it? Is it still in effect? The condition about how I treat you determining whether I eventually inherit. The directness of the question surprised me. Yes, I said after a moment. It is. She nodded again, focusing intently on placing a tulip bulb at the correct depth.
Good.
Good, I echoed, confused. Yes, good. She looked up at me, her expression open and determined. Because I want to earn back what I lost, not just money or property, but trust, respect, family. If the condition is still in effect, then every Saturday, every honest interaction, every step toward being a better daughter, it all means something. It has consequences, good or bad. I studied her face, looking for signs of calculation or manipulation. I found none. Just earnest determination, and perhaps a flicker of the daughter I thought was gone forever. Your father would be proud of that perspective, I said finally. She smiled sadly. I hope so. I've been thinking about him a lot lately, about how disappointed he must have been in what I became. He was concerned, I acknowledged. But he never stopped loving you, Melissa. That's why he built in the condition rather than simply cutting you out entirely. He believed you could find your way back. Tears filled her eyes, but she blinked them away, returning to her planting with renewed focus. Then I won't let him down. Not again. By Thanksgiving, 7 months after Harold's death, our Saturday gardening sessions had transformed the yard into something approaching its former glory. More importantly, they had begun to transform my relationship with Melissa. Not back to what it had been. That naive trust could never be fully restored. But into something new, more honest, more equal, built on clearer boundaries and demonstrated respect rather than assumed obligation. When I invited her to Thanksgiving dinner, along with the Graysons and Thomas, she accepted with genuine gratitude rather than entitlement. She arrived early to help cook, dressed simply, bringing a homemade pie rather than an expensive bottle of wine she couldn't afford. During dinner, Calvin observed the change in her with cautious optimism. Your gardening therapy seems to be bearing fruit, he commented quietly as we cleaned up afterward. One harvest at a time, I agreed. We still have a long way to go. But you're on the path, he noted. That's more than many families manage after this kind of rupture. I watched through the kitchen window as Melissa showed Thomas the water feature she'd installed, gesturing animatedly as she explained how she'd solved some drainage problem. There was a pride in her face I hadn't seen in years, not the brittle, status-conscious pride of her real estate days, but something more grounded, more genuine. Yes, I said softly. We're on the path. Winter came, suspending our gardening sessions but not our healing process. Melissa found ways to help indoors, organizing closets, painting the guest bathroom, installing the smart thermostat Harold had bought but never got around to setting up. Each small project became another brick in the rebuilding of trust between us. By Christmas, when I invited her to stay in her old room rather than drive home in a snowstorm, it felt like a natural extension of our careful reconciliation rather than a risk. We stayed up late that night, talking by the light of the Christmas tree, more honestly than we had in years. I've been seeing a therapist, she confessed, curled up on the sofa with a mug of hot chocolate, trying to understand why money and status became so important to me that I was willing to hurt the people I love. And I prompted gently. She sighed, staring into her mug. It sounds so cliché, but it comes down to never feeling like I was enough. Dad was so smart, so respected. You were so capable, so loving. I felt like I had to be exceptional just to measure up. We never wanted you to feel that way, I said, pained by the revelation. We were proud of you just for being you.
I know that now, she said.
But somewhere along the way, I convinced myself that your love was conditional, that I had to achieve, to succeed, to be the best at everything. And when I started failing financially, I couldn't bear for you to know. It felt like failing as a person, not just in business. I reached across the space between us and took her hand. I'm sorry we didn't see that happening. That we didn't make it clearer our love didn't depend on your achievements.
She squeezed my hand.
It wasn't your fault, Mom. Some wounds we create ourselves. As we sat there in the glow of Christmas lights, I felt something shift inside me, a letting go of anger I hadn't even realized I was still carrying. Not complete forgiveness, perhaps, but movement in that direction. Your father wanted so badly to protect you, I said softly. Not just from financial trouble, but from the person you were becoming. That's why the condition in his will feels almost prophetic to me. He saw what was happening and tried to create a path back. A path I nearly destroyed completely, she acknowledged, if I hadn't hit absolute bottom. But you did, I reminded her. And you found the courage to come back, to confess, to start rebuilding. That counts for something. She looked at me, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Does it count enough? For the condition, I mean? I smiled gently. That's not for me to judge right now. The trust specifies that the evaluation happens after my lifetime. So you've got plenty of time to keep working on it. She laughed, wiping at her eyes. Fair enough. One Saturday at a time, right? One Saturday at a time, I agreed. Spring came again, bringing the tulips and daffodils we'd planted together into glorious bloom. Our Saturday gardening sessions resumed, now complemented by occasional Sunday dinners and midweek phone calls. The rhythms of mother and daughter finding a new way to be family. Thomas became a more regular presence in my life as well. Not replacing Harold, no one ever could, but creating a new space of companionship and joy. Melissa was cautious around him at first, protective of her father's memory, but gradually warmed to his kind humor and genuine interest in her garden projects. It was on a perfect May afternoon, exactly 1 year after Harold's death, that everything changed again. Melissa and I had spent the morning planting a memorial garden for Harold, his favorite flowers, herbs he'd loved to cook with, a small stone bench where I could sit and feel close to him. We were just finishing up when a sleek black car pulled into the driveway. A man in an expensive suit emerged, scanning a tablet as he approached. Elizabeth Porter, he called. I stood, brushing dirt from my knees. Yes, Jason Winters, from Statewide Collections Agency. He glanced at Melissa, then back at me. I'm looking for Melissa Porter. I understand she might be found at this address. Melissa had gone very still beside me. I'm Melissa Porter, she said, her voice tight. The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Excellent. I've been trying to reach you at your registered address. You've missed 3 payments on your structured settlement. My heart sank. The payment arrangements she'd mentioned with her dangerous creditors, apparently they weren't going as well as she'd implied. I'm aware, she said, standing to face him. I've been in communication with your office. My most recent paycheck was garnished unexpectedly for back taxes, which left me short. I've requested a one-time modification to the payment schedule, which was denied, he said flatly. You signed an agreement, Miss Porter. 3 missed payments constitutes default. I'm here to inform you that we'll be proceeding with asset seizure and potential legal action unless the balance of $47,800 is paid within 72 hours. I gasped. $47,000? Melissa, you told me you were making progress on your debts. I am, she insisted, her face pale. But the interest rates, and then the tax lien. She turned back to the collection agent. I need more time. I can increase my monthly payments starting next month. He shook his head. That's not my decision to make. The terms were clear. 72 hours, or we proceed to seizure and legal action. After he left, Melissa sank onto the stone bench we'd just installed in Harold's memory garden, her head in her hands. I'm sorry, she whispered. I should have told you it was still this bad. I've been making payments, I swear. But between rent and basic living expenses, it's like bailing out the Titanic with a teacup. I sat beside her, my mind racing. $47,000 was a substantial sum, but well within my means given the trust Harold had established. I could easily pay it off and end this nightmare for her. But should I? Would that help her truly recover, or just enable the same patterns that had led her here? What would Harold have wanted me to do? Look at me, I said quietly. She raised her head, her expression a mixture of shame and resignation. I understand if this changes everything between us. If you think I've been lying to you again. Have you? I asked directly. Have you been working with me, rebuilding trust, just to eventually ask for money? No, she exclaimed, the denial immediate and vehement.
God, no.
I never intended to ask you for a cent. I was handling it, not well, obviously, but handling it. These Saturday mornings, our relationship, that was never about money. Never. I believed her. After months of watching her work steadily, of seeing genuine change in her priorities and behavior, I truly believed her. Then we have some decisions to make, I said. Together. What do you mean? I took a deep breath. I could pay off this debt for you. The trust has more than enough funds. Hope flashed across her face, quickly replaced by wariness. But that might not be the best thing for either of us. I continued. For you, it might short-circuit the hard lessons you've been learning. For me, it might introduce doubt about your motivations these past months. She nodded slowly, understanding. So, what's the alternative? A middle path, I suggested. Not a gift, not abandonment, but something structured that honors both your independence and our reconnection. We talked for hours, weighing options, considering consequences. By evening, we had a plan, one that felt right to both of us, one I believed Harold would have approved. The next day, we met with Calvin in his office. I explained what we wanted to do, and he nodded thoughtfully. It's an interesting solution, he said. Technically allowable under the trust provisions, with some conditions. We've thought about conditions, I assured him, outlining the accountability measures Melissa and I had agreed upon. He drew up the paperwork then and there. A structured loan from the trust to Melissa, with clear repayment terms, professional financial counseling requirements, and contingencies if she defaulted. Not a gift, not a bailout, but a carefully designed bridge to true financial independence. This is very different from what you asked your father for, he observed as Melissa reviewed the documents. Both in approach and intent. She nodded, meeting his gaze directly. I'm very different from who I was then. At least, I'm trying to be. I can see that, he said, his tone warmer than any he'd used with her since the will reading a year earlier. When we left his office, loan documents signed and certified funds in hand to pay off the collection agency, Melissa turned to me on the sidewalk. Thank you, she said simply. Not just for the loan, but for finding a way that respects both of us. We found it together. I corrected her. That's the difference this time. She smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. One Saturday at a time, right? One Saturday at a time, I agreed. The years that followed brought more healing, more growth, more carefully rebuilt trust. Melissa paid back every cent of the loan, sometimes working 2 jobs to meet the schedule we'd established. She continued her therapy, her debt recovery program, her Saturday mornings in my garden, even after the financial obligation was fulfilled. 3 years after Harold's death, I married Thomas in a simple ceremony in that same garden. Melissa stood beside me as my maid of honor, her face radiant with genuine happiness for me. Dad would approve, she whispered as she helped adjust my simple dress before the ceremony. Thomas makes you smile again. He does, I agreed. But he doesn't replace your father. No one could. I know, she said, hugging me carefully to avoid wrinkling my outfit. That's why I'm glad you're keeping the Porter name as your middle name. Elizabeth Porter Hamilton. It has a nice ring to it. The garden where we stood, now lush and vibrant with both Harold's favorites and new varieties we'd added together, stood as testament to what careful tending could nurture back to life. Not just plants, but relationships. Not just soil, but souls. For years after Harold's death, Melissa met Stephen, a kind middle school science teacher who loved her for her authentic self, not her status or earning potential. They married in the same garden the following spring, surrounded by blooms we had planted together during our Saturday sessions. 5 years after Harold's death, they gave me my first grandchild, a boy they named Harold James, after the grandfather he would never meet, but whose legacy of love and foresight had made this family healing possible. And on Harold James's christening day, as we gathered again in the garden that had witnessed so much of our journey, I finally told Melissa something I'd been saving for the right moment. "I've amended my instructions to Calvin," I said as we sat on the memorial bench, watching Thomas gently rock the baby while Stephen took photos. "Regarding your father's conditional inheritance clause." She looked at me, surprised. "You have?" I nodded. "I've instructed him that regardless of how many more years I live, the condition should be considered fulfilled. You've more than demonstrated the care and respect your father hoped to see." Tears filled her eyes. "That means everything. Your father would be so proud of who you've become," I told her, squeezing her hand. "Not because of career success or status symbols, but because you found your way back to what really matters. Family, integrity, love." She looked out at the garden we'd rebuilt together, at the husband and child who represented her new beginning, at Thomas who had helped heal my heart. "I was so lost," she said softly. "After Dad died, after everything collapsed, I couldn't see any way forward. But you gave me one. Those Saturday mornings in the dirt, they saved me, Mom. They saved us both." I followed her gaze across the garden that had become the physical manifestation of our healing. "Your father always said gardens teach us life's most important lesson."
"What's that?" she asked.
"That destruction isn't permanent," I said, watching a butterfly land on one of Harold's favorite roses. "That with enough care, enough time, enough love, anything can bloom again." As if in agreement, baby Harold cooed in Thomas's arms, his tiny face turned toward the sun filtering through the leaves of the dogwood tree, the tree that had stood 20 feet tall when my world fell apart and now provided shade for a family rebuilt, replanted, and thriving once more. When my daughter told me to stop being dramatic and learn to survive, the day after burying my husband of 40 years, I crumbled inside like a sandcastle hit by a wave. 3 weeks later, I was sleeping in my car outside the same grocery store where I once bought her favorite birthday cakes. But today, I stand in a garden of second chances, surrounded by the family I almost lost and the love I never imagined finding again. My husband's wisdom, written into a will that seemed cruel but proved prophetic, created the path that led us here, to this place where betrayal has been transformed into trust, where wounds have healed into wisdom, where a mother and daughter found their way back to each other, one Saturday morning at a time. And in the end, that's the greatest inheritance of all.